Welcome back to Fast Market on the TD Ameritrade Network. I'm Tom White, and I'm joined by my co-host Kevin Hinks, but we're going to bring in our next guest, and that's going to be Mr. Landon Swan, the co-founder of LikeFolio.com. Landon, thanks for joining us. Great topic today. We're talking booze, and we've got Constellation Brands earnings coming up tomorrow. But I saw some of the data that you were sending over, and a lot of it had to do with the seltzers, the hard seltzers. And we've seen what happened to Boston Beer Company, Sam Adams, the maker. They own Truly, which was one of the big players in this space. That stock has been hammered from about $1,300 down under $600 a share based on falling sales and a lot of their, their growth products. What's your data showing here from LikeFolio that is probably going to give us some insight here to Constellation's results tomorrow morning?
Yeah, sure. So what's interesting about Boston Beer, Sam Adams, is that Truly is the one that's sort of taking some market share away from White Claw, which has dominated the spiked seltzer. But the whole pool is shrinking. They're taking some market share away, and the pie chart is changing. But the overall pool is shrinking because bars are reopening. I mean, you can see here how things are looking, and it's kind of interesting. So on the left, you've got October 2020, and on the right, you've got October 2021. So you can kind of see here that White Claw shrank, Truly took some market share, Bud Light Seltzer took some market share, and then you've got Coke's new player, Topo Chico Hard Seltzer, jumping in there as well. So one thing that we talk about a lot on this show is if it's a rising tide, then all ships are lifted. But this is actually a lowering tide, and so that's a bit of a concern. And so very concerning for White Claw. But while Sam Adams or Boston Beer is taking some market share away, it's in a shrinking environment. I think a lot of it has to do with the bars reopening. We're seeing that mentions of draft beer or beer on tap are up 33% year over year, while hard seltzer mentions are down 8% year over year. So I think probably people are just, less ashamed to drink the hard seltzers in public than they are at home. And I think that's what's happening. So beers reopen and our bars reopen and people aren't ordering them. But you can kind of see, this impact here. Bars are reopening. People are talking about going out to restaurants and bars. And of course, that's going to be good for, the brewing companies and people selling alcohol. We're seeing that reopening impact now. We're plus 19% year over year. Still not where we were, back before the pandemic, of course, but we're on track. We're moving in that direction. So that's good for all of these companies. But within that spike seltzer section, it is shrinking. And so there's a little bit of concern there.
Landon, that is well documented, the problems going on right now in hard seltzer. And the news from Boston Beer certainly affects Constellation Brands. But here's my question. When I look at the portfolio of Constellation Brands, it's got an iconic, high-profile portfolio, especially in the beer category. And I have to mention my mother-in-law, Carol Perillo, that drinks a lot of Ruffino when she's having her Italian dinner. So when you look at these names, don't they have a more balanced portfolio with Pacifico, Corona, Modelo? I mean, they've got other things that if people are moving away from hard seltzer and those products, they're moving back towards beer and things like that, or wine. And isn't Constellation Brands set up a little differently than some of these other companies? Can't they withstand this transition that was to the hard seltzers and now back to beers and wines?
Yeah, in fact, I would argue that they're probably the best set up to withstand that transition.
Sure.
Right? They're set up to, maybe take advantage of some of that hard seltzer, but really, like you're talking about, they've got so many different brands. In fact, we track 87 brands by Constellation STZ, so they've got a lot, and it's all different categories. It's beer, it's wine, it's liquor. So they do a lot of things. Some of the ones you mentioned, Modelo is actually the number one import beer, the number one gainer of imported beer, plus 17% year over year. Pacifico is doing extremely well as well, with the Gen Z really crushing it. And actually, Corona is the number 5 beer in the country. You got Bud, Heineken, Stella, Bud Light, and then Corona's number 5. So they're doing well. They're well positioned. And what's interesting among, the big three, I guess, Constellation, Sam Adams, or Boston Beer Company, and Budweiser, they are the number 1 in happiness. They're all pretty high, as you can imagine, with an alcohol company. They're in the 70s, but Constellation Brands is actually the highest of those three. So I think they're well positioned. Plus, you add in the fact that they're really they're branching out. They're trying different things. They own, I think, 38% of Canopy Growth, and they're doing a partnership with, I think it's called Karma Water, if I'm not mistaken. That is CBD infused beer. So they're really trying a lot of different things, but their core is very strong, Kevin. That's a great point.
Yeah, and Landon, we know that a lot of these, booze makers, they basically do a lot of M&A activity, take over specific brands. But if you look at it from the seltzer, the hard seltzer segment, which you had a lot of data points on, and that's where Constellation Brands doesn't have that issue that Boston Beer does, because what they're doing is taking one of their brands, Corona, and making hard seltzers on it when they've already got a great product here. So they're probably insulated a little bit more. But if you look at some of the beer brands, and I think that's the growth segment for Constellation moving forward, if you get out of the summer, I'm not drinking as much Corona, Modelo, Victoria as I did probably in the summer during the winter. Does that affect them, according to your data, where you're starting to see slower sales based on time of the year?
No, that's exactly right. I think the Spike Seltzer is more of a summer drink. I think Corona is definitely more of a summer drink. So I think you're absolutely right there. But don't forget, they've got a ton of brands, including wine, I think, which you could argue is more of a winter drink. But look, this is so, we were talking about the hard seltzer. You can see when it kind of came onto the scene in 2019 and everybody was doing it. Everybody is drinking it, even survived through the pandemic. Like that was a big spike. But then, of course, reopening is pushing it downward. But I do agree with you, Tom. I think that it's a very seasonal thing that we're looking at. But so far, if you look at how Memorial Day went, how July 4th went, so far things are starting to get better when it comes to alcohol sales on a year-over-year basis. People are getting out more. They are throwing more parties. There's more events, and so I think that's just going to increase the number of sales, obviously. And so the data that we have, along with a lot of other consumer tracking companies, is showing that the summer events have been better across the board for alcohol sales.
Now, Tom, one last thought. I mean, you cutting back on your beer drinking just because summer's over, well, that's just a character flaw. Don't put that on our viewers and our listeners, that you lose sight of your goals and your priorities. But Landon, here's my question to you. Their vodka, you don't see it a lot. It's not as high profile as some of the other big vodkas. Have they made any dent in the vodka? I don't know how to pronounce it. It's Svedka. Is that their brand? Have they made? I mean, vodka is a very popular drink nowadays. It looks like it's their lead brand there in that category. Are they making any headroads there?
Not that I can see. No. I would agree. Also, I don't know how to pronounce it. We'll go with what you said. Yeah. But no, we don't see any big headway there. But overall, actually, they're positioned pretty well. We've got them, going into earnings fairly neutral on the, plus minus, I guess. I think really probably the macro economy is going to be more of a factor on their earnings and everyone's earnings. You guys are talking about shipping and all kinds of supply chain stuff. We'll see how that all plays out, since they do have a lot of imports. But we're pretty neutral going into them. But I will say, I want to reiterate, the happiness is the highest among the big chain or the big brand companies. So at 78% happiness, I would say that long term we're bullish, buying any kind of dips here. And I do like that they're not, sort of all in on the hard seltzer. I wanted to kind of point out that is on the decline. It had a nice little run. We'll see if it comes back. Maybe Tom can boost it next summer by himself. But we'll see how well it does. But I like that they're insulated a little bit from that.
Yeah, and it's pronounced Svedka, guys. Come on, you guys got it. I got
it right then.
Yeah, you got it. You were close there, Kev. Got it. But at the same time, I think one of the things I like the fact that you guys are just neutral on it, based on you've got positive data. But I think a lot of people and investors are going to be focused on that conference call when they talk about prices of aluminum, prices of glass, transportation expenses. How much will that eat into their profits? Because they are expecting a big quarter, as your data shows. All right, Landon, thanks so much for the discussion. Always good talking booze with you. Appreciate it.